Before start conversation about the new supply chain, I think it's really important and fundamental for us to address the problem. And the problem that we're looking here is one that is very big. So let's check the first problem that we're addressing and check also your knowledge in the crowd. How many pieces of clothing were produced last year? So raise your hand if you think that is over 50 billion. Raise your hands if you think that it's under 50 billion. Raise your hands if you think that it's over 100 billion. Raise your hands if you think it's over 150 billion. I know you. Smart guy. So it is estimated that over between 150 and 200 billion pieces of clothing were produced last year alone. Right? It's also amazing. So how many people are living in the world today? So that's a massive problem. And I think the aggravating of this problem is that there is enough clothing in the world today to feed in the coming 6 generations. So if you're looking at clothing production and looking at the supply chain of clothing production, we seriously have a big problem. So this is problem number 1. I'll tell you about what's problem number 2. The first picture that I shared with you was an AI-generated picture. This picture is a real one. This picture was taken in Accra, where it's one of the main spots in the world where you have the excess of the clothing industry today. So this jacket that I'm using here is also brought from Accra. I was there a few weeks ago to realize that it's madness, the amount of clothing that we are producing today. And what is more sad about this is because the people paying the price of our overconsumption are not us. Huh? We're not seeing the problem. If you're sitting in the global north today, you have this act that you're going to pack your clothing and you're going to donate it to the Salvation Army, you're going to put in the donation box and think it's going to get to a good destination. What will happen over time is that clothing has so much excess that there's no place anymore for where clothing is arriving. In the same beach that we have here in Accra, there's literally 10 million pieces of clothing coming every week. And they're being shipped, and they're being shipped, and they're being shipped. And I was there and I saw with my own eyes that 60% of all the clothing that is arriving today has no destination. This clothing has no use anymore. It's basically waste. It's clothing that has no more functionality and people cannot sell it further. And the worst than this is that in order for them to sell these pieces of clothing, in order for them to make a living out of this clothing, they have to carry on their heads. So you have these very big bales of clothing. They're 50 kilos. They weight more than 50 kilos. And there are people carrying this on their heads and crossing through the markets in Guantanamo, which is the second biggest clothing market in the world. And if you're a woman or a child carrying these pieces of clothing on her head more than 5 days, you make a damage on her spine for a lifetime. So it's not about clothing. It's not about the excess of production. It is about people. And in order for us to solve the problems of supply chain, we have to look at people first. So this is what we do at United Repair Center. We believe that in order for us to change the behavior that we have within our supply chain today, we have to change the way that we perceive the people behind the clothing industry. So what we do is that we try to reenact the connection between the end consumer and people wearing the clothing today. So what we're doing is basically creating a way in which you can change the position that we have today of making, producing, and making clothing 2 ways, and transforming in a way that can create a new way of enabling the saving of clothing to bring it back to the chain. Because every second, the amount of clothing that I'm talking to you is just gigantic. So we have approximately every second a truck full of clothing has been dumped somewhere in the world, and we're not seeing. So how to change this? And it's a pretty difficult challenge. So how to change this? We believe that in order to create a new solution, in order to change this amount of clothing, you as a consumer, as a producer, as a brand of a retailer, have an option. And what we believe is that in order to change, take, make, and waste, we have to create what we call it a reuse solution. And in order to reuse, repair is at the core of everything that we're doing. And changing the use of clothing from linear, which is clothing getting into waste, to circular, which is clothing that get back on use. So what we see happening is a change from using clothing by purchasing clothing. So today you go and purchase the clothing, use it, and at the end of life of your clothing, you send it to the landfill. When to change this into at the end of the life clothing, either you avoid it to send it to the landfill, or you bring it back to the system. And we believe that in order for this to change, there are three key factors. They're pushing our market and pushing brands in order to act to a circular business model. The first one, we call it the public opinion. So Generation Z has more willingness to buy sustainable products than any other generations in the past. The biggest challenge is that they're not affordable. So this is pressure number one. The public opinion is each time more pressuring brands and retailers to act more sustainably.